Yo, what up guys? I'm here with one of my top guys. His name is Eli, and Eli's here. He's working with a client right now for insurance. And he asked a question that was super important, and I love when people start diving deeper into the psychology of sales. And it was, how do you he said you ask questions. Go ahead and restate it for us if you don't mind.
You always ask the right questions, but how you ask the right questions from an A and B perspective. Instead of asking just basic ended questions, you ask questions with purpose and meaning behind it.
Nice. So number one is that first point, always understand who you're talking to. The question that I might ask Eli is going to be different than a question that I ask someone else based on their desired outcome, which is point number two. Understand what their desired outcome is. So when you know who you're talking to and you know what their desired outcome is, you then know how to aim or directionalize your question. Here's a tangible example of that. I like to explain the psychology before giving the actual strategy. Most people just want the strategy without understanding the mindset. When you understand the mindset, you don't just know how to do it, you know why to do it and when to do it. So here's an example. Let's say I'm talking to someone and I'll say, hey Eli, we're gonna sell life insurance. It's gonna be the example we're using today. Hey Eli, I know that you want something that's gonna build cash value for you. Do you have anything right now in place that's gonna make your money go to work for you?
I do not.
Okay, that's a question to get him to respond about a cash value policy. Let's say that he now just had a kid and I'm gonna sell a basic term policy. Hey Eli, I know that you have a wife and a kid now. Do you have anything that's gonna protect your income if something were to happen to you?
I don't.
Okay, there's another question I'm gonna ask him. So now I understand who I'm talking to. First guy was a young guy who wants to just make some money. Second guy is someone who wants to use that insurance policy to be able to take care of a legacy. That's how I ask intentional questions. When you're asking intentional questions, you get intentional answers. You see, Eli, the issue is a lot of salespeople, they ask very basic or ambiguous questions and they get an ambiguous answer. Here's another example of that. We've all heard the objection, I need to think about it. If you're like me, you're like Eli, we hate that objection, hate it. And I was actually working with a client this morning and we did a role play and he said, well, Cody, what do you need to think about? Or what are some things you need to think about? And I was like, oh, I hate that he asked that because it's a very up here, high level, ambiguous, all over the place question. Now you're putting the burden on the client or on your prospect to have to think about what they need to think about. What I like to do is I like to give a double bind, this or that, with objection handling. So let me ask you this, Eli. Do you need to think about if this is something you can afford or if you see the value in getting the policy to take care of your family? Or let me ask you this, Eli. Do you need to think about if this is something that you can afford monthly or if just the overall amount is within your budget? So I'm presenting the two options. It's called a double bind. The same way if I'm going to do a follow-up with someone, I don't say I'm going to follow up with you next week. I say, okay, I have some time tomorrow or Thursday. Which one works better? And I heard you doing this earlier today on the phone. You said the client said evening, then you said what?
I said, okay, perfect. I have a 5:15 and I have a 6 o'clock. Which one works better for you?
It's easy to choose. In sales, you want to give the person the next logical step to take, the next logical step. A lot of people are trying to make them just think with these crazy questions. You don't want them to think on a sales call. You want it to just be in flow. So just kind of going through motions. And this kind of goes back to the whole drive-through analogy. You go through a drive-through, you order a burger and fries. I promise I had a salad today. But what do they ask you? They say, okay, do you want a large fry or a medium fry? Or do you want a small or a medium drink? What is it implying there in that question? What's it implying?
2 options.
Yes, but also there's no implication on if you want a French fry or a drink, it's which size do you want? So it takes the emphasis off, do you want this? Which one do you want? Oh, do you want to pay cash or card? You probably heard someone say that, right? It's locking someone into a double bind. Oh, I'll do this one. Because in sales, you should be leading and your prospect should be following. When you can effectively lead, your prospect will follow your lead if they trust that you have their best interest in mind. In sales, you always have to have the prospect's best interest in mind, and you only sell to them if you can actually help them. They're in a good position with whatever you're selling. Never take them out of a good position to put them in a
Bad one.
Put them in a bad one. We were just talking about that right now with the client. He found that he can get him a better rate. He said, but hey, this is less coverage. Am I taking them out of a good position? One thing that we really preach here at our insurance agency is to not just flip policies and sell to every single person. Make sure it's actually a good policy for them. Make sure there's a benefit. They understand what they're getting. So going back to the client and asking these intentional questions, Eli, any single time that I'm on the phone, I want the client to be able to tell me what it is that they need. But if I ask them, what do you need? They're going to say, I don't know. I'm just looking for quotes. But if I ask them an intentional question like, hey, Eli, let me ask you here. Do you have anything in place right now that's going to be able to secure your daughter's legacy if something were to happen to you, right? When I ask these intentional questions now, I get an intentional answer for it. So again, going back to this, you have to be very understanding of who you're talking to, what is your intention behind talking to them, and what is the desired outcome. So Eli, give me 2 tips that make a great salesperson.
A great salesperson is one that can actually listen and understand. And the second sales tip is that someone that can actually tailor themselves and their services to pretty much out in the client. To sell is to serve. If you're not serving, then you're not selling.
Absolutely. And so number 1, you said was to listen, right?
Yes, sir.
So very important key, because a lot of people, they think they're listening, but they're just passively listening. They're not actively listening. You may have heard of active listening skills. So what I do, anytime I'm on a sales call, I always have a piece of paper and a pen. That way we can actively listen to what our prospect is saying and be able to break it down. So for example, if they say, man, this is so stressful in the past trying to get a policy, I'm going to write down that word stressful in the past to get a policy. So now I'm going to tailor my presentation and say, hey, you know what, Miss Jones, we make it very, very simple. We take all the stress out of getting a policy and make it simple for you. Maybe in the past, they said they had a policy that lapsed. I'm going to say, hey, you know what, Eli, I'm going to make sure we get you something that's locked in at a rate that you can afford so you can keep this thing forever and not need to worry about if this policy overlaps on you again. I'm overcoming potential objections based on my delivery of my presentation and of what I'm saying, what I'm selling to someone. So active listening is huge, guys. And this is not just on a sales call, this is in life. When I teach sales, I teach communication as a whole, because communication is the chunked up high level version. Sales is just the chunked down little leg of communication. You can have public speaking, you can have sales, you can have one-to-one conversations. So there's chunked down versions, but everything all circles back to that same overall hierarchy, or the thing that arcs above all of it, which is communication. So if you're talking to someone, you may have heard, or you may have encountered a situation like this where you're having a one-to-one conversation with someone and you can just kind of see their eyes are all over the place. They're not really paying attention. Maybe there's a lot of people around. They're kind of looking to see who's out there. You literally know where their attention is at. And what we feel, have you ever experienced that?
100%.
And what we feel when someone does that is this person doesn't care. A lack of genuine interest in what's going on. Also, you've probably been in a situation, Eli, where you're talking to someone, you're having a conversation, and before you even finish, they're already like just waiting to say what they have to say. Very annoying. And it's a huge turnoff from a communication standpoint. If you're trying to do a business deal, if you're in a relationship and you want them to know that you understand and that you're with them, it's a huge turnoff. So when it comes down to communication, active listening skills, pause, wait a second before responding, and always, always, always listen with the intent to actually understand the person's true desire versus just to respond with what you want to say. I hope these communication tips help you guys. Have a great day. See ya.
See you guys.